DFW Airport officials anticipating about 30 flights to arrive around the 1 o'clock hour, and from there they're also anticipating for flights to start taking off from here later on this afternoon. But all of that hinges as well on the airports that these planes will be flying to, depending on what the security situations are at all of those airports. Of course, they have to be able to fly from one secure airport to another, and all of these airports have to be certified by the FAA, and that's what we're being told here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We've got one passenger here that we've been speaking to with this morning, Hovev Iran, and he lives in Israel. Got stuck here in Dallas here on business. You're trying to get home. What kind of obstacles are you running into? What are your plans?
The obstacles, first of all, with the 2 days, the desperate thing to try to arrange flights from my hotel, which was impossible. So I came over here. And over here, I gave, together with the American airline agent, we tried to find all the options going through Europe, Mexico, Canada, and. In the meanwhile, they arranged for me the afternoon flights to LaGuardia, and from there I can hit Europe or any destination that will get me close to my last destination. So I think that my decision to come to the airport and hop to the first plane that goes into some kind of my direction was correct, because you can't do that from home, or you can't do that on the telephone. You have to wait 3 hours for them to answer you, and after they answer you, they can't do anything about it.
Yeah, like I said, you're trying to get to Israel. Are you concerned at all, given the situation and what you've seen in the last 48 hours? Or are you worried at all about traveling? I think that's going to be kind of the big issue here.
I'm not worried about traveling, because I'm worried about driving more than traveling. It's statistics. Flying is safer than anything else in the world. And of course, there was a big trauma here, but if you look in the reality, driving to the airport is more dangerous. So I don't think people should be afraid of flying. Yeah, but it's more scary because it's flying and in the air, and it's movies and it's drama. But I think that's one of the safest places that you can be is in the airplanes, still.
When you heard what happened on Tuesday, what went through your mind?
It was, there's no words. It's a shock. It's hard to understand it. I don't think that anybody still understands it. It'll take time to understand the issue.
All right, thank you very much. We got to toss it back to Atlanta. Leon, back to you.
All right, thank you very much. Ed Lavandera in Dallas. We'll get back to you later on. Go over to you, Darren.
Yeah, we want to take our viewers live to Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Our Brian Cabell is standing by. This, of course, is the site where United Airlines Flight 93 crashed on its way from Newark to San Francisco, crashed on Tuesday. And I understand in this investigation there's some breaking news. Brian, what can you tell us?
Well, Darren, in the last hour or so, the FBI and the state police here have confirmed that they have cordoned off a second area about 6 to 8 miles away from the crater here where this plane went down. This is apparently another debris site, which raises a number of questions. Why would debris from the plane, and they identified it specifically as being from this plane, why would debris be located 6 miles away? Could it have blown that far away? Seems highly unlikely. Almost all the debris found at this site is within 100 yards, 200 yards away. So it raises some questions. We don't want to over-speculate, of course, but there were some cell phone callers, one cell phone caller in particular, who said he saw a bomb or something that looked like a bomb with one of the hijackers. Also, the man who took over the plane apparently announced that at one point there was a bomb on board the plane. So again, we don't want to speculate, we don't want to jump to conclusions, but what we do know is that there is a site about a half mile behind me where the plane went down, where most of the debris is, and then about 6 miles away up by a lake, there is another area that's been cordoned off, and state police and the FBI have said definitely there is debris from the plane located there. We have a crew on the way right now. We should have pictures of that a little bit later on. In the meantime, the search here goes on. 80 searchers going foot by foot, combing the area, looking for evidence. They have not yet found the black box. Darren?
Which was my first question, so I'll move on to my next one, Brian. We don't want to speculate about this large debris field, but it seems to me from covering a number of plane crashes on the scene that, if nothing else, you can say this is not typical for a plane crash to be spread across an area this large.
It certainly doesn't make sense, because most of the debris has been found in a very compact area, within 100 yards, 200 yards, maybe a little beyond that. And then all of a sudden they're telling us 6 miles away they have another concentration of debris. They say it's very small pieces. Most of these are very small pieces. Most of the pieces here are no bigger than the size of a briefcase, they say, and the pieces 6 miles away, maybe even smaller than that. They have talked to a number of individuals here. They say they have talked to people who saw this plane during the final moments. They haven't confirmed whether they talked to anybody who saw this plane actually land, or crash rather. And as to whether it broke up on the way, we don't know that. FBI is being very tight-lipped about that. But again, it leads to that possibility. It certainly leads to a number of questions.
You mentioned they have yet to find the black box. It would seem to me, when you compare the 4 plane crashes of Tuesday, this would be the site where they would be most likely to find a black box.
That's what they told us initially, and I think they're somewhat disappointed they haven't found it. It's been 48 hours, but they are still hopeful they will find it. There is a pond nearby this particular site. They may have to send divers into the pond. They haven't done that yet, but conceivably it could be in the pond. It could be anywhere. It could be at this other debris site. They've also found some other debris scattered around this area. They say, in fact, some individuals have been collecting it. Again, we're talking about very, very tiny parts. The biggest part they found at this site is an engine part, and most of the other pieces are probably no bigger than this particular notebook. So again, very small pieces. They had hoped to find the black box by now. They're still voicing optimism they will find it.
It's not an assignment I would wish on anybody, but I would say that you would have to have an assignment like that to appreciate what that looks like when a plane comes crashing into the ground and basically just drops out of the sky. Brian Cabell in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, thank you very much. Also a note from yesterday when we were listening into an FBI news conference, they were saying they expect this search just at this site to take about 3 to 5 weeks. So they're going to be very deliberate and look for every possible piece of evidence. Brian, thank you very much. Leon.
Well, in the meantime, the country and the air industry in particular is trying to at least get somewhat back to normal. It's been some 51 minutes now since airports around, certain airports around the country that have met certain security guidelines have been cleared to begin operations again. One of the busiest in the world is Atlanta's Hartsfield International Airport, and we would assume that that airport would be among the first to begin the process of getting back online. Let's check in now with our Bonnie Anderson, who's standing by there at Hartsfield. Bonnie?
Well, Hartsfield is officially open. Earlier today, the officials removed tape that was across the fronts of the doors. They notified their concessionaires and they alerted all of the airlines. We're going to try to show you some pictures now of planes on the tarmac if we can. First flight out will be, in about 5-10 minutes. It's a South African Airways flight to South Africa. Delta, which is headquartered here and the largest carrier at this airport, is first expecting to bring in planes that were diverted to Canada. They then plan to reposition aircraft across the nation and then begin limited flights later this afternoon. We're told Continental and American, however, will not have any service out of Atlanta, but those things can change. Joining me now is the airport's general manager, Ben DaCosta. Given the fact that there's still some uncertainty in which planes and which airlines will be flying, what would you tell passengers to do?
The most important thing for passengers to do is to call their airlines and confirm that their flight is flying. Many of the airlines that would be scheduled will not fly today. And so the ramp up nationwide will have limited flights.
And in terms of what they will need to get out on the concourse, they must have a confirmed ticket, correct?
We want passengers to call their airlines. Many of them will have e-tickets. When you get to the airport, will discover there's no curbside check-in, and they'll have to go to the ticket counters in order to get a boarding pass in order to get through checkpoint security.
So no one without a boarding pass will be allowed out. Family members can't go out on the concourse.
With the one exception, if you have a child that is flying alone, one parent can accompany the child to the gate area.
Now, you have said that you don't want to talk about any specifics about security here. We do know that Hartsfield has always had a very multi-layered system, especially following the Olympics. Is it fair to say, though, that the new precautions have been taken?
We have spent the last 2 days making sure that we are completely secure and safe and have implemented every one of the FAA's instructions.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. So within about 5-10 minutes, the first flight out of Hartsfield should be taking to the air. No word, though, it's a little bit uncertain yet how long it will take for all of the airlines here to get back to absolute full operation. I'm Bonnie Anderson, CNN, reporting live from Atlanta.
All right, thank you very much, Bonnie Anderson. Now, let's go up to New York. CNN's Michael Oku has been spending quite a bit of time out there this morning, out in the streets, and has been showing us some incredible pictures there, which give you a very good idea of the kind of heat, the kind of devastation that blasted through that area. Michael?
Hi, Leon. I'm standing just a few blocks north of what was the World Trade Center, Ground Zero, and all morning we've been bringing you horrific pictures that give you a sense of just how devastating the impact might have been felt by individuals who were in the area at the time. Certainly the impact was felt by some of the cars that you see here that were at the scene, and rescue workers have been pulling the wreckage away from Ground Zero in order to continue their work. And This area, which was this morning of particular interest to us journalists, has also become something of a shrine. A woman who has spent many years here, she's been a resident since 1976, came out this morning with a handful of flowers, and she distributed them on top of each one of these cars. You can see how devastating the impact was. And you can see just, if you go over this way, William, and get a sense of some of the neighbors here who are checking out the impact. You can see everyone who has come by here this morning sort of meets this scene with a degree of incredulity. People, I think, didn't really quite understand just how devastating the impact was here until they saw something, anything that came from what was essentially ground zero. This is a neighborhood, I should tell you, that has experienced a lot in the last couple of years. Just about a block or two away from here is where John F. Kennedy Jr. lived. And you can remember that this was the site of a memorial to Mr. Kennedy, and now, of course, it's become a memorial to those people who might not have lived after the attack. Now, what you're looking at here is obviously the hollowed-out cavity of what was once a police car, probably a car driven by a detective, not one of those recognizable police cars. And this is a vehicle that must have been someplace near ground zero at the time. There's no indication as to whether these vehicles were vehicles that were driven down there once rescue workers and police officers and other law enforcement officials heard about what had happened here and tried to arrive on the scene to try to help people out. But if in fact that did happen, you can see that there was a terrifically awful impact. Just across the street here, you're looking at what was once a van used by Con Edison, which of course is the utility company that supplies much of Manhattan and much of New York with energy and other utilities. And again, you can see journalists and some neighbors around the area taking pictures and I think taking stock of what's happened in the past 48 hours. This entire neighborhood has been shut down essentially from 14th Street, which is just some blocks north of us, throughout the course of lower Manhattan. It's pretty much been like a ghost town. And again, the neighbors here, it's not just a financial district, but it is actually a neighborhood. They've experienced a lot. In many of the buildings that you see around me, there's been some structural damage. And in those buildings that even haven't sustained structural damage, there's often no electricity. I spent the night in a building here that had absolutely no hot water. So yes, there are plenty of people who are suffering gravely as a result of this, and the impact was felt far beyond what you might call the epicenter. Leon?
Michael, I'm wondering, did you get a chance to talk with any of the residents of the neighborhoods and have them tell you exactly where they were and what they felt like and what they thought when the whole thing first started coming crashing down?
Absolutely. In fact, the woman who came here, this resident against it I mentioned, who has been living here since 1976, she came out with an armful of flowers, and she said she was actually standing on her roof after the first plane had made impact. And they were looking at the World Trade Center incredulously, as everybody was. I remember watching from the confines of the comfort of my home. And she said that when she saw the second plane go into the second tower, she was completely devastated. And she said she felt complete and total powerlessness. And she said part of the reason why she came out here with her flowers was because she wanted to take the opportunity, now that essentially ground zero had been brought to her doorstep, to maybe change this powerlessness into a feeling of humanity, is what she said. I want to take this powerlessness and remind ourselves that we are actually human.
Michael, one final question, if I can quickly. I notice you're not wearing the mask now. Does that mean that the air situation down there has been cleared out for a wider area or for the whole area, or what?
Well, I should tell you, I don't know whether it's that smart of me not to wear the mask. As soon as we get off the air, I'm going to put the mask back on. I haven't talked to any local officials here to find out exactly whether the levels in the air are safer than they were before. But the fact is that after a while, it does feel a lot more comfortable here. Earlier this morning, when we saw great dark plumes of smoke emanating from the hot center